Josh, Trent, welcome to the Thought Room.
It's awesome to be in the Thought Room with you.
I mean, technically, we're in the Wellness Force headquarters.
We are.
At the moment.
But it's transformed into the Thought Room.
Which, yes.
There's lots of thoughts that go on here. So
it is dope in here. I just have to say that. So if anyone wants to know what the room that we're in looks like right now, you're going to have to go watch some YouTube videos of Josh Trent's Wellness Force podcast, which, by the way, is epic.
Thank you.
You've been doing this 6 years.
Yes, 6 years. 2015.
Man, you're an OG.
OGs are like 2011, but I'll take that. Thank you.
I think you're an OG. I think you are. You've interviewed some incredibly fascinating people. Some that come to mind are, you've had Luke Story, you've had Aubrey Marcus, you've had Dave Asprey, you've had so many people. Do you have some guests in your mind that stick out as like some of your most powerful interviews? Like if someone was going to go watch or listen to your show today.
I really love Dr. Teresa Larson. We did a podcast about her book and her story called Warrior. And it was about her overcoming her eating issues and being in the military and just the way she spoke about it. We actually put her in our intro for the podcast. And it's about loss. Like loss will happen. And so how we respond to loss is the determining factor of the quality of our life. So I love that one. The All Is God series with Paul Chek was really powerful as well. What are we doing here? What is God? Exploring how these terms of God and spirit have really been bastardized and abused. And then we have a show coming out with Hamilton Souther that's going to be really powerful about the dark and the light of plant medicine, which is a world that you play in quite a bit. So those are ones that are top of heart, top of mind.
Sweet. Excellent. So everyone should go check those out. And back to this vibey room, there's like these cool lights bouncing off these geometrically shaped walls. And to back it up, how we actually got into this room together was that we met at a birthday party. Like Charles Clay, who was the last episode of this podcast. So everyone listening should also go check that out.
Full circle.
Yeah. And we were discovering that, you were talking about other people we've intersected with and how somebody, mutual friend, Justin Wren, who was also on this podcast, mentioned me to you last week. And it's so funny how we end up together.
We're following the breadcrumbs.
The cosmic breadcrumbs.
As you say.
Yes.
Yes. They're all cosmic.
Yes.
It's like everything in life is spiritual. And people that tried to deny the spiritual aspect of life, good luck. How are we going to create any meaning if we don't have some connection to a higher power of some sort?
I love this because I'm looking at even the books on your shelf. You're a very science-minded person in a lot of ways. And I'd love to hear more about your background because I know you love to research things and that's like a big part of your passion. But now I'm hearing you say this piece about being spiritual as well. I'm curious how the two of those are married for you and what's kind of happened in your journey for you to come to that.
Wow. Well, the mind for me has always kind of been at war with the heart. And so I guess the biggest breakthrough I had was about 4 years ago. I read this book by Hawkins. It's called Letting Go. And it just rocked my world. So everyone gets to go download that. I love it on Audible because the way that the author speaks it, I think it was someone he hired actually. It's so profound.
David R. Hawkins.
David R. Hawkins. And he talks about this space between the head and the heart. And it's exactly, what your question is like, how do we operate in this 3D world with an open heart, but also have a sharp mind? And for me, like I grew up in an environment where there was like heart, but it was wounded. My mom was wounded. My dad was wounded. I therefore became wounded. So I had a dark contrast that I came into the world for, where my mom had manic bipolar. My dad left home when I was 2 months old. I was 4.5 pounds, 4 pounds, 11.5 ounces when I was born. So I was premature, like in an incubator for 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks of my life. So I chose some pretty big contrast to come into this world for. And I've spent the majority of my life honoring my mind, but making sure that the space between my head and my heart consistently grows shorter. And so Hawkins talks about this. It's like the biggest space for so many of us is the space between our head and our heart. And so if we can marry those, and if I can marry those, that's the whole journey with this podcast. You know, the thought room or wellness force, you know, our core mission, my mission in life is to share authentically about my discovery process of physical and emotional intelligence. And intelligence is not something that you can just read in a book. You know, I have some nice books here, but it's my ability to like gather the books, listen to the podcasts, and then apply. That's the second phase of intelligence for me, closing the gap between the head and the heart. And then lastly, like the third phase, the most important one is integration or embodiment. You know, because right now our nervous systems are trading redox chemicals, and I'm looking at the micro muscles in your face and making sure that you're trustable and you're doing the same to me. We're all doing this. So to the degree I'm aware of my capital T trauma, my lowercase t trauma, am I projecting my beliefs and my wounding onto you, or am I just being present as an open vessel of love? To the degree that I've gone through the gathering, the application, and then lastly, the embodiment of all the 400 interviews and books that I've read and experiences that I've gone through, like that's the degree of closing the gap between head and heart. And essentially that's what living a heart open and a mind connected life really is. And it can't be faked. You know, I've gone through phases where I'll fake it till I make it. And I had a mentor in the past, and he was like, it's not about faking it till you make it. This is Dr. Jade Teta. He was like, it's about being it until you see it.
Yes.
And that's really been my quotient of like, how do I do that without being disingenuous or inauthentic at all? And that for me is this constant continuum. You know, I'm about to be a father in June.
Yes.
And it's just this constant learning phase and constant continuum of, am I really showing up connected head to heart? Have I gone through the intelligence phase authentically? And how am I showing up? You know, and I think that's a journey that we all walk. Mine just happens to be like front and center, so that my audience and people that listen to me are like literally peering into my discovery process.
Yes.
And so it's revealing.
It's very vulnerable.
It's confronting at times. But shit, I wouldn't have it any other way, really, because I don't want to hide. I spent a lot of my life hiding, wearing a mask.
Yes.
You know, our mutual friend, Adam, we just did a show right here where you're sitting about like, how do we take off the masks that we're wearing?
Yes.
And so that's been my journey. You know, how do I just live life without a mask, head to heart connected, but really going for it and really sharing, even when I don't want to, even when it feels shitty, even when it sucks.
So beautiful. That moment when you can start like integrating all the pieces of yourself and just be like, this is who I am, and show up that way without having to hide. Or, you know, like I was just telling you that I spent the last 2 days up north in Austin, outside of Austin, with a mentor of mine who I spend time with on his land. It's a sanctuary. We do sweat lodges there. And I went out into the wilderness.
I want to do a sweat lodge.
Sweet. I'll take you with me.
Yeah.
I went out to do a solo mushroom journey in the woods. But before, I was talking to this mentor, and he is, you know, he's been given a bundle by the Lakota Nation and gifted the privilege of leading these sweat lodges. And so he's looked at like this community leader, and he's also this like amazing photographer who loves to take really sort of like edgy and like nude photography that's gorgeous and all of these things. And so his place is like, he's got these gorgeous photos on the wall. And he was talking about how for a while, you know, he wanted to take them down every time he had an event, because it was like, here he is in kind of like this chief role, and then here's this other side of his like creativity, and it felt really vulnerable. And it wasn't until recently that he was able to kind of to do that. But to throw it back to what you were saying before, I love that, like closing that gap between the head and the heart. Last summer, I was spending a lot of time in isolation in the woods in Canada. My parents have a retreat center there. And I was in the garden, and I was watching the bumblebees on these pink flowers. And I was thinking about my friend Eric Godsey, because he always says the wisest things. And I was thinking about the term knowledge bombs. Like, what does it mean to drop a knowledge bomb? And that was just kind of swirling around in my awareness. And then something struck me like lightning. And it was this line. And it was, knowledge only becomes wisdom when it passes through the prism of the heart. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
I can feel that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's exactly what this is. And my question to you is, for anyone listening to this who is wanting to cultivate some sort of practice to lessen the gap between their head and their heart, how might one begin?
Well, I just took a deep breath and that's it. So it's tattooed on my arm, se posso respirare, posso scegliere. And in Italian, that means if I can breathe, I can choose. And so it's a reminder to me to not just do my breath work as if I'm ticking a box, but to literally use the breath to uncover whatever's not loving within me. And by doing that, I am constantly checking in on a daily basis of, am I really being honest about how I'm feeling? Or am I kind of compartmentalizing my emotions so that they don't have to pass through the prism of the heart? One of the coolest things I received is somebody was like, I love about your show is like, if you're feeling something, if you're going through something, if you're learning something, you fucking share it. And that's the most important thing is I'm not perfect. None of us are perfect. And so if we can have like a dedicated self-introspection practice, mine is breath. And then in the garage, I have a sauna and a cold tank and I do my movement in there. And I have my groups that I go work out with conscious men. All of these things are tools, but they're not something that you say to others because you want to look like you're doing your work. We all know when we go to bed at night, when we're laying there in silence, if we're actually looking within or not. And so the times where I'm looking within is when I'm actually using my breathing. And for the majority of my life, I was born premature. I had sinus issues. I took a lot of antibiotics. So there was like 15, 20 years where I didn't really know what it was to breathe. I had a stuffy nose forever. And the science is all showing us now, if we're not breathing through our nose, we're not activating our parasympathetic nervous system. We're not going into rest and digest. So I think about the first 2 decades of my life, I really wasn't ever breathing. And even in my 20s, when I found fitness, the backstory is like, I became up to 280 pounds by the time I was 21. And so I used food as a way to not feel my emotions. Nothing was passing through the prism. I was just kind of surviving. And I learned that survival mechanism by watching my mom, watching my dad, being bullied. I was bullied quite a bit when I was younger because being overweight as a kid, you get picked on. So people can resonate with this if they've ever been abused or picked on. We start to develop this outer shell. It's almost like, on ice cream where you put the magic shell. We all pour a magic shell on ourselves, but it blocks the magic from coming out. So it's actually an anti-magic shell that we all grow.
Totally.
And so I structured that for myself to not feel what I was feeling. I didn't even know what emotional intelligence was, which is totally cool in this moment just to reflect like my whole life's mission is to explore emotional and physical intelligence. And so this prism, it's a beautiful concept. Like, unless I am doing my work every day, some type of breath practice, even if it's like 6 deep breaths when I'm feeling stressed, or doing a 7-minute box breathing practice with a couple of breath hold retentions. It's the whole ethos. It's the whole genesis of why about a year ago, I launched a program called Breathe, Breath, and Wellness. And in that program, it's 3 weeks long. It's all my lessons from Costa Rica and Sedona and Mark Divine and Gwen Payne and Niraj Naik and all these masters, even Dan Brule, where I was like, what are they doing? Why are they so on purpose and happy in their lives? It's because they're embodying the power of the breath. You and I probably follow Bruce Lipton and Dispenza. And so we know that we are a conditioned bundle of nerves unless we are aware of whatever our somatics are trying to tell us. And so when we do breath and actually be the breath, it's way different than if we're just like going to a ceremony. A lot of people go from ceremony to ceremony to ceremony. I fell into that trap. But the big piece that I was missing, and the big piece that most people are missing when they jump from ceremony to ceremony, and it could even be breath work as well, they're not pausing to integrate.
Yes.
They're not pausing to integrate. There's no real discussion of integration. There's no like physical, emotional, spiritual practice of integration.
Yep.
And whenever we're opening ourselves up through the breath or through any psychedelics, we open ourselves to 4 and 5D consciousness. And what happens there is we open ourselves up to entities and energies and all these really complicated things that really science doesn't have a way to describe. And so the only way I could describe it is we are all an amalgam of our lower self, our past life pushed down generational trauma, and also the current collective wounding that we're experiencing every single day. So it is our birthright. It is our responsibility to continuously clean the conduit that we live in, not just from a physical perspective, but from a mental perspective too. Most people don't realize this, but we actually have 4 diaphragms. People think of the diaphragm as right here, this dome-shaped muscle under the ribs. We have a diaphragm that starts in our perineum. We have another diaphragm in our abdominals. We have a diaphragm here, our main diaphragm, and we actually have a cranial diaphragm as well. And so this fluid that flows through our bodies at all times, if we're doing breath work, if we're being breath work, then we're cleaning our system. It's almost like in a stream. We're here in Austin, so you know what it's like when you see a stream and the sediment collects and it kind of piles up in the stream. Well, if you clean out the sediment, the water can flow. We're the same way. Like we're just like a river. If we clean out our sediment, then everything, our thoughts, our emotions, all of our shit that's not love can actually flow. But if we're not doing any kind of practice to allow the sediment to be released, then it's almost impossible for the truth to flow, for the prism to be accessed, for us to just be our authentic selves. And so that's my number one, is that, but also like conversations like this, where you open yourselves up to other people's thoughts, other people's opinions and ways of being, that helps the water flow too. So there's an amalgam of tools. I just really love the breath because for anxiety and depression, it's the number one. And I don't believe, which is kind of controversial, I don't believe that people should be doing plant medicine if they haven't done some type of a sit practice or of Vipassana practice. I've done a 10-day Vipassana in the desert about 4 years ago. To the degree you're prepared to do psychedelics is the degree those psychedelics will either heal you or harm you. That's a whole podcast of its own.
People that are just listening to this couldn't see me right now, but I was nodding very emphatically to that last piece. And to add my personal sprinkling to that, I am so glad that I waited to do ayahuasca and even all psychedelics until I had a well-rooted meditative practice. For one, to sit for just that long physically, to sit for long periods of time. That's difficult if you haven't trained for that. And I was told before I went to drink the medicine to take it, to consume it sitting up and to stay sitting up for as long as I could. Because again, it was like about spinal alignment and the chakras and the ability to clear things out that way. And then using the cosmic orbit and like different circular breaths to do exactly what you're saying, is clearing out that energetic sediment and really engaging with it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because if we don't have the knowledge of what to do, then I guess we become open to other thought forms, other energies, other things. And it's really about knowledge. Look, the reason why in the Bible, I'm not a religious man, but in the Bible, it's written, to those who have nothing, more will be taken. To those who have everything, more will be given. Now, what exactly is Spirit trying to communicate there? Spirit's trying to communicate that when you have the knowledge, when you have the awareness of what is really going on and how you can heal yourself, clear yourself, be yourself, then you can actually live life from that abundant state. I actually disagree with law of attraction. I'm not a huge proponent of law of attraction. I believe in the law of reciprocity.
Go on.
I think that law of attraction, just like the terms God or spirit, have been abused. There is a dark shadow in the personal development industry, and especially in the spiritual world, where people that can speak well and have great marketing and are articulate, people that are great leaders and that are very persuasive, can use words and marketing and pictures and images to convince other people that somehow they're a guru, somehow they have it all figured out. But you and I both know, like when you feel someone's energy, when you look into someone's eyes, If you yourself have done any kind of awareness work or introspection work, you know if someone's full of shit or not. But people aren't doing that self-practice, self-introspection work. So they become victimized by, quote, gurus that are very good at speaking and marketing and things like this. So to circle around to this, yeah, it was perfect timing that you waited. And I waited as well. I was 34 years old before I did my first ceremony of any kind.
Wow.
I mean, I had played around with like mushrooms a couple times, but it wasn't sacred. It was more just like, let's have fun. We live in sacred times. So it's really important that we approach any kind of sacred medicine or practice with that kind of honoring, with that kind of love. Because if we don't, then unfortunately, the road to hell gets paved with more good intentions. And so we really have to be aware and cautious right now, especially here in Austin, especially in San Diego, where I came from, or Denver, or New York, or any of the big hubs where like culture and creativity come through. We have to really be cautious, and we have to be kind to ourselves to not fall prey to really this authoritative playfulness that is spoken by these so-called gurus and leaders that can really take advantage of people and hurt people. So there's a lot to unpack there, but essentially like be cautious and be kind and continue to commit to do your work every single day.
100%. I could not agree more thoroughly. The last piece I want to say about the breath is I was also thinking about throwing it back to David R. Hawkins and letting go.
Are you a fan of Hawkins?
Oh, yeah. Yes, everyone should go listen to him. I was telling you before about living down at Soltara. I was actually listening to that audiobook while I was down there working with ayahuasca.
Amazing.
And it paired so well. And thinking about the breath, the dichotomy or the irony is, you go into ceremony and you don't really have control. So it really is about surrendering, right? But yet you do have control. And I found that the control for me is in the breath. And it's in oftentimes surrendering to the type of breath that your body wants to have in that moment. So you become aware, okay, maybe I'm breathing a little bit fast or I feel anxious. I've just become aware. You ask the question, how does my body want to breathe right now? And then you allow it. So you're both in control and not in control.
Yeah. The one thing I'll say on that, there was a fourth night of ceremony that I did, and science and also anecdotal experience is showing us all that like the majority of DMT is produced in the lungs. So DMT is something that comes through our body naturally. It's found all over the world. It happens primarily at birth and death, but it also can happen in very long cathartic breathwork ceremonies.
Yes.
And this fourth night of ceremony 2 years ago, every time I would like really take a nice cyclical breath in through the nose, out through the mouth, I felt this like sensation, almost like my lungs, I could feel the cilia in my lungs transferring oxygen and carbon dioxide. And it was such a fucking trip.
Yes.
I'll just share that with you. Like, it was so cool because I was like, oh, this is actually everything. I had my ass handed to me in that ceremony, which was a 2-year journey of me clearing an entity, doing medicine at the wrong place at the wrong time. It happened for my healing, but I don't wish it upon anyone.
Yeah.
But the only thing that saved me from literally going insane was having a dedicated breath practice, because truly, if I can breathe, I can choose. And I didn't, it's so funny. You ever do something or experience something, and then like 4 or 5 years later, you look back and you go, oh, that's why that happened. You get like the experiential tick in your brain of like, oh, the lesson's actually 5 years later.
Right.
And I find so many people, myself included sometimes, we're searching to get the lesson as quickly as we can before we've gone through the gauntlet of pain. So just let that land for a moment. Like, the pain teacher is present for us to learn how to listen to it and surrender to it. But so many times we're all bypassing the pain teacher to try to sprint to the lesson so I can get the lesson of why this has occurred. Meanwhile, we haven't actually given ourselves time to feel the pain of what the lesson actually is. And so, of course, as Pema Chodron says, the lesson repeats until we learn the lesson. And that's been my journey in life. And, I'm currently experiencing all kinds of lessons all over again. This is the largest my body's been, the most weight I've carried in 10 plus years. And so it's, again, a lesson for me to like constantly surrender to, am I breathing? Am I loving myself? Am I taking care of myself? And that cyclical orbit you mentioned is really powerful, because it's not just what Montauk Chia talks about with sex and sex energy. It's also the flow of chi through our whole body, through our whole systems. Right behind you, we're on video here. So I have all the chakras, and then I have earth, wind, water, fire around the heart chakra, because those are roadmaps. Those energy systems, if one of those are blocked and we're dishonoring any one of those, or we're not honoring the fact that we're literally from the earth, we're not on the earth, like we're a product of the earth, otherwise we wouldn't be here. If we're not honoring all of this, then we can get stuck into a trap of what I call intellectualizing healing or intellectualizing spirituality. So the breath, you can't hide. You can't hide from the breath. There are people that actually can hide in ceremonies. There are people that get addicted to the rush of ayahuasca or get addicted to the rush of mushrooms or whatever it is. And their ego is so strong and so cunning that they won't allow themselves to surrender to whatever lesson is really trying to come through. And so there's so many things to just, I guess, be aware of when we bring up this question of breath or healing or just why the hell we're here in the first place. To not, even how you started this podcast, to not fall victim to the what am I going to say? Intellectualization. I had some dark chocolate.
Nailed it.
I had some dark chocolate before we got on here. I was like, it increases
so
our
did I.
verbal
We
fluency.
got wild.
The intellectualization of healing, it's impossible. You cannot solve a heart-based issue by trying to use the mind. And that's really what this is all about.
This really resonates with the experience that I was having in the woods. And I was sharing some of this on Instagram this morning along that vein of sharing unflattering truths or potentially unflattering truths, which was like, I hadn't really done plant medicine since I left Soltara, which was over a year ago. Much like yourself, had a very challenging integration experience with ayahuasca. I did 13 ceremonies in a year.
Wow.
Went from 0 ceremonies to 13. And it was what I was called to do on a soul level. But the challenges that I faced, the initiation of that, the depth to which I went, it was almost hard to come back from. And the darkness of that, which I'm sure that you relate to, I can feel that, is not something I would wish upon anybody. So I have been very discerning about diving back into the plant medicine world. Only now, over a year later, have I been called to be with mushrooms again. So I was creating the container for that. I knew I wanted to be out in nature. I checked in intuitively. I was like, maybe I'll just do like a gram. It was like, no, 3 grams. And I was like, okay. So set everything up, drove 2 hours out there, packed the bag with all the things and the blankets and the food and the water, and I had a compass and just making sure that I was going to have everything. And I got out there and I found the spot. I let the land lead me to the spot. I took it very ceremonially, and then I was like waiting for the medicine to open up. And I was like, okay, why isn't this happening? And finally, when it did, I was so tired. My truth is that I have been way overworking, way overdoing it.
Join the club.
And the mushrooms, or my higher self, whatever you want to say, is coming through when we're in these states, was like, too much. You're doing too much. And I heard my inner child and my nervous system literally wail. I was sobbing into the grass, just being like, I need a break, too much. Even though it's all beautiful things happening, I'm trying to answer every outreach. I'm trying to thank every listener. I'm trying to, and I'm tired. And the mushrooms were kind of like, we can't do anything with you when you come to us this tired. And I was like, oh, like even this ceremony I've forced this to happen. And that was humbling. It was.
So was it really you guiding yourself to the medicine, like your ego, or was it the medicine guiding you to the ego?
That's a great question.
That's kind of what I'm wondering. It's like, because our communion with medicine is
right.
like, we're half beast and half spirit. Right?
I suppose it doesn't even matter. Like, it doesn't matter.
Really
At that point, it's like, I got the message.
Yeah.
I was just like, okay. And then the other piece was like, how do you cultivate a deep, meaningful relationship? You don't wait till it's broken to work on it. You're working on it all the time in a conscious way. Same thing with our relationship with these medicines. We don't just use them recreationally, and we don't just use them when we're feeling broken. It was like, come to us when things are going right. Like, that's where the real meat and potatoes is. And so I was like, okay, heard. And I really just had to grieve and release into the earth a lot of energy that I'd been carrying and picking up from overworking and from clients and from, all the things. And I was like, oh, maybe this is it for today. I'm not going to have like big, crazy downloads and download my next offering right now, Humbling.
Humility is the teacher for the most powerful masters in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to not phrase this correctly here, but it was something like that was written in the Tao with Lao Tzu.
Yeah.
And it was something like, the path to self-mastery is surrendering to humility.
Yes.
That's a really big one. So you're right. You don't really need to know, was it your ego that was driving you to the ceremony, or was it the medicine or spirit herself or consciousness herself? It was really like, who cares?
Mm-hmm.
Things happen for a reason. And I think, again, we try to intellectualize why things happen, how they happen, all this stuff, when really, like, the lesson is being with whatever is occurring in the present moment and listening to yourself at the level of consciousness you have and the level of self-introspection you have, to just be present with what is in the moment. Mm-hmm. We hear this a lot, being present in the current moment, staying focused, being non-attached. But these are all terms that take years, sometimes decades, to truly embody.
Right.
And so I think of the song, like, You Can't Rush Your Healing. I forget what the artist is.
Yeah, that's Trevor Hall. I said that on the intro of my last podcast.
You can't rush your healing.
Totally.
Like, I'm 41. I'm still healing.
Yeah.
And actually, our buddy Adam, when we did the show, he was like, I'd like to rephrase this. I'd like to rephrase that we're constantly healing to be, we're constantly learning.
Yeah, evolving.
Because I almost feel like healing has gotten a bad rap. It's like, oh, so-and-so's still healing.
Right.
It's like, well, don't you mean that we're learning and growing? Isn't that what healing is?
Right.
Like you had your heart broken before? I'm sure you have. You're a human, right? So we get our heart broken, and then we realize through the teacher of pain to just look back and go, okay, what was a potential red flag that I abandoned myself for?
Right.
How did I abandon myself when it came to a man or a woman that I loved?
Mm-hmm.
And how can I not do that again? Like, how can I have, really what it is how do I have the courage to not abandon myself the next time that same kind of somatic experience or inner knowing comes around? That's the big one. And like, things will repeat until we have embodied the mastery to just say no. It's like that scene in The Matrix where Neo puts his hand up. He's in the hallway.
Yes.
And he's been fighting and it's been a struggle. And he just all of a sudden turns gently, puts his hand up, and the bullets just fall.
Right. The boundary.
because he decided, because
right.
he said so.
Yeah.
And so I've had, especially this past year, so many dark thoughts and so much darkness that I feel, not just within myself, but also in the collective. I mean, we're in the middle of a psychological warfare with this mask wearing and vaccines and control and trust your brother, the government, because you don't know best for yourself. I mean, it's been a really hard journey for me.
Yeah.
I mean, we moved out to Austin because of what was going on in California. It broke my fucking heart. If you would have told me that after 40 years in California, I'd come out to Austin, I would have said, you're crazy.
Yeah.
But something brought me out here. It could have been a combination of like my son, and it's better for business out here. And there's this rich community where we get to communicate and talk about real things. But we are all, myself included, making meaning of what is happening as we go. We're all figuring it out. No one's got it on lockdown. Even when we're in lockdown, we're still trying to figure out,
Right.
okay, why are we allowing ourselves to be in lockdown?
Right.
So these lessons are going to continue. I think that our generation, I'm like 1 foot millennial and then 1 foot next generation. 1980 was the cutoff. So I'm like right there with you.
You're
so
cuspy.
I'm cuspy.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I get your generation, and I also have a connection to my generation. When you grew up, do you remember a time where there wasn't cell phones and electronics? Okay, so you're in touch with that too. Yeah. But I do have a genuine concern. I have a genuine concern for what's happening in this world where people that are growing up, like my nephew, he's going to be 17. He has no idea what it's like to not be around an iPad or an iPhone or some kind of technology. And so what this is creating for all of us, especially that younger generation, is like there's an external locus of control. So no longer is it you going to the forest or us just being in nature or us just trusting ourselves. We're using all these devices and all this Internet of Things to somehow make us feel okay. Mm-hmm. And it's a big lie. We have to relearn what it's like to just be here without all these external locuses of control. We have to reimagine and reconnect with like, what is control anyways? Mm. Fucking illusion. Mm-hmm. There is no such thing as control.
Right.
You know, my lady is about to birth our child, and I'm like, we're not in control.
Right.
We can't control birth. All we can do is pray and set intentions. We can't control a ceremony.
Right.
All you can do is pray and set intentions. And the real work comes with like, how do we respond to it? How do we respond to it? So it's that little piece that seems so small, yet it's so important. And that is like, how do I train myself to respond? Right. Whether it's eustress from a cold tub or physical training or being vulnerable on a podcast, like all these ways that we just continually over and over and over again train ourselves to respond instead of react. And again, it's easy to intellectualize. Mm-hmm.
Completely. When you're talking about this, you're reminding me of the work of David Deida, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And
there's a book in there,
Way of the Superior Man,
Way of the Superior Man,
which is one of the books that we covered in the Conscious Man, the 12-week program that I'm just finishing up the first cohort of. But he speaks about, you know, when your woman, in this case, in the book, he's saying when your woman is expressing something emotional to you and you're getting triggered or your brain is wanting to go into the space of coming up with the solution, he just says, drop into your belly and, you know, even like put your shoulders back, open up the heart space physically, lean in, turn toward her, and continue to breathe. It's just that kind of accordion in the background, your breath, your awareness in and out as you're also listening. And I did an exercise last week with a piece of fruit. This was on the Zoom call with the men in the Conscious Man. And we all had a piece of fruit and we were learning how to be really present in a sensual experience with eating a piece of fruit. And I walked them through each of the 5 senses. So we just held the fruit for a while. We felt the weight of it. We smelled it. We felt the texture of the skin. Did it have volatile oils when we rubbed it? And this whole 15-minute process before ever sinking our teeth into the fruit, it was like this pure appreciation, as if it was a lover that we were making love to, letting the juices drip down the chin. And then I was also asking them, are you breathing? While you're doing this, are you breathing? Can you stay aware of your breathing the entire time? You know, when we're taking a bite, we still can breathe in and out of the nose. This is what's so miraculous about the human body, right? This is why it's so uncomfortable when you are stuffed up and you can't take a drink of water, you can't breathe. And I was asking them, you know, while you're eating, can you still breathe? While you are kissing, are you breathing? You don't have to stop kissing to breathe. You don't have to stop making love when you breathe. Be aware while you're breathing or while you're doing these things. Be aware while you're showering, while you're driving. Am I breathing? Am I breathing? All the time. And this is what, you know, Thich Nhat Hanh talks about this all the time, is like coming home to ourselves as our bodies, this vehicle that we're driving through this really weird, strange, wonderful experience. Can you come home to the vehicle of the body? How do you do that? Through the breath, through each step, being aware, like, I am stepping now. I am breathing now. Now I am breathing in. Now I am breathing out. And that can change it does change your experience, your entire experience of life.
Fundamentally.
When you, it sounds so simple. If someone's listening who has not done this or reached this point in their practices, in their meditation, in their breath work, I personally implore you to keep going, because once you cross the threshold of this, it will change your entire paradigm.
A lot of the times before I do an interview, and even with clients that I work with, I say, how are you doing? Check in, do a quick scan of your body. Where is there tension? Where do you not feel free? A lot of times I'll take 2 fingers, I'll put them right under the belly button, and I'll just have the client push and say, does that feel light or does that feel constricting? And it's exactly what you're talking about with data. And I've heard Wineland talk about this too. Yes. And I was trained by Johnny Blackburn, who trained with Wineland and data. So my background to what you're talking about is like 2014, I got into men's work in Encinitas and did that for 7 years, and then eventually led a men's group. And breath was always a component of that. Mm-hmm. Because by the time we arrive to a group or to a podcast interview, we have probably, even with a great awareness, we have probably held our breath. We have probably received stuck energy and tension in our systems. Like, it just happens. We're fucking human. Mm-hmm. So having just a quick check-in practice of like, can I take 2 fingers and put them under my belly button? And can I push there? And can I ask myself, am I really relaxed or not? That's a beautiful starting place. Mm-hmm. It really is. And something you said earlier that I wanted to piggyback on is you were like, yeah, it's not easy. And I think lots of things in life are actually super simple, but they're not easy.
Right.
Like doing 6 breaths ain't that hard.
Right.
We can breathe in through our nose and out through our mouth 6 times, but it's the faculty of reminding yourself to do it,
right,
and listening to the cues in our bodies that determine the quality of our lives. Just because something is really simple does almost never mean that it's easy to do.
Right.
Like, for example, with my partner, Carrie, if she's sharing and it triggers me, like you're mentioning about, if I start believing my mental programs and those mental programs turn into emotion, which is energy in motion, and that energy in motion gets stuck in my system somewhere, well, if I'm not conscious of that, I'm going to constrict and project that onto her. Be like, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to fix it? Mm-hmm. Do you want me to do something? You want me to take out the trash? So the big thing that I'm getting at here is like, wow, what a practice. Like Spirit designed this everyday evolution of us for us to continually check in with the breath, continually check in with the body. And I feel like, especially in the circles that we run in, there is just this constant conversation around somatic experiencing, much like what you did with your men with the fruit. Mm-hmm. That's a somatic experience. Mm-hmm. You know, you're feeling the fruit, you're smelling the fruit. Mm-hmm. The more of our senses we can use to open us up to our partner or to a conversation or even to our work, you know, how much is business needing a fucking transformation right now? Totally. The old adage of what I consider to be like the patriarchy, the ivory towers that are being deconstructed, that have been showing cracks for a long time, the way we're treating Earth, the way we're treating each other. I'm not here to say that masculine energy is wrong. I actually don't believe in toxic masculinity. I just fucking don't. Because to be human, there's human toxicity, right? There's feminine or masculine toxicity. It's our job to have a real open, honest conversation, doing the checks and balances like you and I are talking about, to really either be with the truth or not. And we're seeing this on the highest degree right now. Republican, Democrat, pro-life, pro-choice, black or white, you know, do you believe in BLM or not? It's like everyone is being forced to make a decision. Well, there's no decision to make because the only real path is that we are united. Unity, that's what community is. And so we're all falling prey to this in the same way that a lot of orators that I mentioned before that are spiritual marketers, they're directing people to be forced to make a decision. Guess what? Like, you pausing and taking 6 deep breaths, that's a powerful decision of its own.
Mm-hmm.
There's no need for any of us to be forced to make a decision like, do you believe in vaccines or not? Do you believe in Black Lives Matter or not? No, that's the wrong question. It's like trying to answer the question, how do we get peace on earth? That's a fundamentally flawed question.
Right.
The only way we get peace on earth is by truly doing the work to have peace within ourselves. That's what ripples out and creates peace on earth. So again, the intellectualization of how do we make things right? How do we box solutions and hand them to people? It's just not that easy. It's a lot more complicated than that. And that's really what I think we're all learning here on planet Earth. And I look at the chakra system behind you and I feel like we are all being attacked and wounded at our root and sacral chakra, whether it's safety, financial security, safety of our loved ones. Am I going to have a job? Am I going to be safe? Am I going to be okay? We can't climb the ladder on our energy systems. And we also can't climb the ladder on Maslow's triangle.
Yes, the hierarchy of needs.
We can't get out of the lower realms if we're stuck being victimized to be forced to make a decision on, quote, what we believe.
Right.
So it's very nuanced and it's not so reductionized that especially the mainstream media is putting out right now. It's a lot more complicated than that.
For sure. And so for anyone listening who isn't familiar with, the pyramid you just mentioned of Maslow, at the bottom, there's kind of like our safety and security needs. And then it kind of moves up through all of these different tiers. And at the top is self-actualization. So the premise is that if our basic safety and security needs are not met, we basically become very uncivilized animals. And we're just working to get those needs met. And you can't move into a space of creativity. You absolutely can't move into a space of self-actualization when these lower parts are being threatened and or attacked.
This is, and I don't want to go too hardcore conspiracy here, because I think we are in the middle of a conspiracy, but conspiracy theory is theory. It means that you are trying to prove a theorem. You're trying to prove by gathering evidence that a theory is correct. We don't need to prove that we're in a conspiracy. We're just in one. We're in a conspiracy. Like everything we've talked about today, all the pain that you and I have experienced, to be human means that we are in an environment. We all created some kind of a contract to come here to planet Earth to live out this human experience. There is a conspiracy here of darkness. And that darkness at all times is trying to come into your space, come into your mind. Why do you think that there's a morning and a night? It's fundamentally built that way.
Right.
And I'll not go too deep into the conspiracy aspect, but I will say, if you look at all the teachings of the past, and again, I'm not a religious man, but I am a spiritual man. In the Bible, Isaiah 45:7, I, the Lord, create good and evil. I, the Lord, create dark and light. I, the Lord, create all these things. So right in the Bible, we are being taught, and in many religious studies, we are being taught that spirit creates all things. So God made man so that man would know God. And this is Alan Watts. We're all knowing God by learning ourselves, by either learning ourselves or running away from the challenge. So we're in a conspiracy by design. It's confusion by design. It's supposed to be challenging by design so that we will all know what it's like to expand and to grow and so we can be able to hold more spaciousness, so we can do more things, so we can be a mother, be a father, be a great podcaster, be a source of truth that people can depend on. You don't get to that without experiencing some kind of expansion or pain. And so whether you're non-denominational or whether you are religious or whether you're spiritual, we're all doing the same thing with different words. And the thing that we're doing is we're either leaning into the expansion or we're retreating from it. And by the way, there's no judgment either way. Who am I to judge somebody for not leaning into their expansion or leaning into their best self? I mean, shit, it's rocked my ass so many times. I've gone back 2 steps back, 1 step forward. But when I look back on like the continuum of my life, the only thing that's allowed me to like arrive to here, which I know there'll be even more in the future, has been at least my willingness to connect with something outside myself. Just start there. At least my willingness to connect with something higher intelligence, higher power, spirit, God, whatever it is. That is actually the determining factor, I think, for most people, even when they're tapping into the darkness of God. People use money to control others. They're still somewhere in their psyche, somewhere in Bill Gates' psyche. He is thinking, oh, I'm helping people. I'm going to block the sun. Have you seen this? He's going to try to block the sun now.
I've not seen this.
And try to like block the sun from heating up the earth. It's like our egotism as a society, our complete asinine approach and our hubris and our massive, ever expanding ego is blocking the power of God, blocking the power of Mother Earth, and thinking that somehow we know better. Like, can you believe this? That somehow we know better than the birds and the trees and the flowers and the sky and the river. I'm doing a 10-day vision quest for my 41st birthday. And in this vision quest, I'm not going to lie, I'm pretty fucking scared. I've never been in nature with no food for 5 days. I have no idea what's going to happen there. But you know what? I'm open to it. I'm open to receiving whatever I'm supposed to get, because there has been a lot of shakeup in my life. And the reality is it's been quite emotional. I've gone through in the past year more depth, more pain. I've cried more in the past year. I've processed more in the past year. I've gone through more in the past year than I would say I ever have. It's been super concentrated right now. And the only thing that I can have solace in as to why this is occurring is that I'm being prepared for something bigger. I'm being prepared to hold a bigger space. I'm being prepared to calmly, confidently hold a space where even more people across the world can trust my guidance. But I can't be trustworthy in my guidance if I myself haven't been humble to whatever pain or whatever lessons or whatever things that are coming my way that I'm experiencing. I can't be authentic unless I've gone through the gauntlet. And so all of us need to take our breaths, turn towards spirit in some way. And I don't have the perfect answer. I do not have the perfect answer. But we all need to turn towards spirit in some way and just fucking surrender. Use the tools we have to just surrender to what is going on and not become a victim of our mind. I do believe that I mentioned it before, we are half beast, half spirit. So it's beautiful to have science. Like, I love science and I love proof and I love biology, but all of this is completely trumped by the universal wisdom of spirit. And by spirit, I just mean that thing that we all know is there, that we don't exactly know what it is, but the more we trust it, the easier our life gets. That's what I'm talking about.
So powerful. So powerful. I'm going back to the pieces about the darkness and the light. And in the spiritual community, I have seen sort of a gross oversimplification with the good vibes only sort of approach to life where all is light, right? And I viscerally don't agree that that's the case.
It's not real.
And so there's nuance here that I want to get into. How does one live in the integration of darkness and light and yet not live it from a place of the fear of the darkness, right? So there's an awareness that there perhaps are dark forces at play, which are really just energies that have maybe lost their way, or, human beings that are just on a journey. Like you said before, Bill Gates, he believes this is his mission, and he wholeheartedly believes that this is his mission. I believe that every single one of us is doing the best that we can with the tools that we have. I don't really think anybody's out there to hurt others. We're just acting out of the projection of our own hurt onto others from how we've been wounded. It's very complicated, but it's also very simple. So how do we take this knowledge that there is duality in this life? If we want to be leaders, if we want to be embodiment of love and light, how do we not live a life in fear, but also not have the wool pulled over our eyes?
Start with the awareness that all the thoughts we think, all the emotions that we experience, all the things that we go through in this world is like temporary. That's the one thing I'll say to begin this. Everything we experience, from a thought, from a feeling, they're all programs. A mentor and a business partner of mine, Rachel Fiore, the mastersofself.com, she taught me this concept of programs. So we all come into this world really a clean slate, right? When we're born, I'll go breath and I'll go esoteric. When we're born, if you cover a baby's nose, if you plug a baby's nose, the baby will start to choke. Now, why is that? Why does a baby start to choke if you cover his or her nose? It's because we are all taught to breathe through our nose by spirit. We're designed that way. We're not mouth breathers. We naturally, like right now, your mouth is closed, you're breathing through your nose. When I hear you speak to me, I close my mouth, I breathe through my nose because it grounds me. That's how we're designed. So we forget about that when we experience trauma. For most people, it's 7 or below. We get traumatized in some way, and we learn to breathe through our mouth because it allows us to feel safer. It's our stress response. This same thing happens to what you're talking about when we start to experience the darkness. Like darkness comes in and it starts to infiltrate our thoughts. For some people, it's OCD. I'll share with you when I had the ayahuasca ceremony almost 2 years ago now, I had thoughts coming in for over 6 months and they would not go away. They just would not go away. And so I got the gift of being healed by a mentor and a friend of mine, Paul Chek, and he taught me this prayer, and it's really powerful. And I would love to share this because it's exactly what you're talking about. For anyone that is experiencing looping thoughts, and by the way, I'm not a psychologist, this isn't medical advice, but for anybody that is experiencing continuous negative thoughts where you feel like you're being kind of pulled into the abyss, almost like a octopus is grabbing you by the foot when you're about to get air, this is really the prayer for all of us. And that is, what are you here to teach me? You physically turn to your thoughts and you close your eyes and you ask the thought, I don't want to get rid of you. What are you here to teach me? What am I here to learn? And you just wait. What are you here to teach me? What am I here to learn? And if you have a dedicated practice, if you're still enough, something will come through. Now, here's the thing. This is the big point. If nothing comes through, then that is a choice point for you to summon your courage, breathe in through your nose, and tell this thought form, because really what a thought form is it's an entity, it's an energetic system. Dr. Vernon Wolf from holodynamics calls them past life. They're connected to ventricles. He calls them some type of specific thought form, and I'm blanking on the name, but everyone has a description for what these are. So you turn to it and you say, what are you here to teach me? What am I here to learn? You pause. And then if it's not true, you summon your courage and you say, by the power of God invested in me, I ask you to leave. You are not allowed in my inner sanctum, and I send you love for the journey. And that's it. By the power of God invested in me, I ask you to leave. And you say it with courage. And when you say it with courage, that thought form isn't receiving hatred, isn't receiving anything other than love, because that's what all thought forms want. They just want to be set free. What feeds negativity is our resistance to it. What feeds dark thoughts and dark energy is our continued resistance and anger and wanting it to leave. You could fractalize that and say in inner child work, if you are angry at the child for the child expressing hurt through your system, maybe you're about to go on stage and you don't love yourself enough or you don't believe in yourself enough, the worst thing you could ever do is turn to the child inside of you or turn to the dark thought form that's coming to you and say, get the fuck out of here. I don't want anything to do with you. Leave. Then you're just going to feed it more. It's actually going to grow stronger. So it's those two things. Be aware of it. Say the prayer for yourself and also to honor the thought form. And then if it's not there to serve you, then it is not allowed in your inner sanctum. And you repeatedly do that practice as much as you need to. And that's what really saved me, because I was in this wrong lens of trying to be angry at the thought, move the thought out of my system, deny the thought, fight the thought, instead of just like letting the thought come through. And this is the big one though. And this is where I tend to disagree with Eckhart Tolle and a lot of these people, is it actually is okay for you to summon the courage within yourself and say, from a place of love, get the fuck out, because you're not allowed here anymore. And if you stay here, if you choose to stay in my inner sanctum, then you will be stuck in purgatory forever. You'll be stuck in this purgatory forever. And you don't want that, because that's what these thoughts want. They just want to be set free. All of us just want to be set free. It's why we wound each other, is because that energy just wants to be set free. But we have to be courageous enough. This is about spiritual courage. This is about us being spiritually courageous to, instead of try to smoke it away, watch porn, shop, fuck it away, work it away, whatever it is, all we're doing is just counterintuitively, we're feeding the ghost that's haunting us. And so that's where I would begin. I would begin right there, and I would use that as a template to grow the courage within yourself and be okay with it being hard, because it's going to be hard.
You talked about pain as the teacher, as a great teacher in these days of darkness. I'm wondering if we can slow it down for a second and you can drop into your heart to bring yourself back to one of the most difficult days in this dark period for you. And if you can get in touch with the tendrils of the tenderness of that pain and bring us back and maybe paint a little bit of a picture of what that experience was like for you.
Well, you go deep in the thought room, don't you?
All day.
There's nowhere to hide in the thought room. I love that it's the thought room, by the way, because we all have these programs. I want to go back to that template, and then I'll answer your question, because it's a good setup for it. So we come into the world pure, and I'll close the loop on this because I didn't close it before. When a baby is, when they have their nose covered, they choke. When we come into the world, we're pure. We learn programs. Mm-hmm. We literally learn programs. We learn to mouth breathe.
Right.
We learn to hold our breath. We learn to protect ourselves. We armor up. We learn to not go into emotion because it's modeled by parents, because emotion is scary. We learn all these things. And so I, myself, all of us, we spend our entire lives either unlearning what we have been taught that just simply isn't true. I love Alan Watts so much. He calls it all retch and no vomit. Everyone's being taught these lessons. Mm-hmm. And when we absorb the lesson, we feel that it's not true. A prime lesson of this one, before I get to my tentacles, is go to school, get a great job, have a house, get married, have kids, get your 401k, and have everything structured so that you can be safe when you're retired. Well, guess what's missing from that picture? A unique expression of your authentic soul's journey, which is the whole fucking point of us being here. That's the whole point.
Whole point.
So with that as a frame, we learn these mental programs. Those mental programs kind of keep us at bay. Those mental programs turn into emotional programs. We start attaching to it like, oh, I'm an angry person. I'm a judgmental person. I'm this, I'm that. And then we have a behavioral program, which is the behavioral program for me that came online. And I really haven't gone too deep into this on a show yet, but it feels right. For 25 years, pornography ruled my life. Like literally just ruled my life. Like anytime I was about to go further in my business or have deeper connection with a woman or have greater community, anytime I would reach what Gay Hendricks calls like the upper limit, the glass ceiling, I would use porn so that I could retreat to a lower self place of safety. And I have had to do so much work to forgive this younger version of Josh, to really connect with him and to understand him and what he wanted. And so part of what happened with this last psychedelic ceremony that just rocked me to the core of my being was I literally had to experience every single scene I had ever watched on a computer, on my phone. This is a whole nother topic. Pornography is, we are literally lab rats inside of an experience that is trying to bastardize and delegitimize the sacred sex and the sacred sex energy that God brought to us on this earth. It is the only time in human history that 24/7, 365, a 10-year-old boy can pop open his iPad and watch pornography. I mean, it's an absolute tragedy that we're just beginning to see the headlines of. So that was my story, 13 years old to like 37 years old. really, just like lots and lots of porn. And so the reason I was drawn to that is because when I was young, my mom's illness, my dad not being there, me not having emotional intelligence, I just needed a place to feel safe. It actually wasn't about coming. It was about me feeling safe in my own body. And so, as you know, like there's a very cathartic release that happens when you orgasm. And so my nervous system took that as being safe. And so anyways, in this ceremony, I had to witness every disgusting scene I had ever seen. And I had to take ownership of it. And it was fucking confronting, to say the very least. And that's what a lot of those OCD thoughts were. Because I watched some things that just simply weren't who I was. But I was doing what Gabor Mate talks about so eloquently, and that is I was feeding the hungry ghost.
Yes.
The hungry ghost was hungry for connection, hungry for peace, hungry for feeling at home in my physical body. And I just didn't know how to do that. And so the darkest time for me actually was when I got home from the ceremony 2 years ago. I had just met Carrie. I had just gotten to this relationship. I was dealing with these OCD looping thoughts. I was taking radical fucking inventory of all the ways that I had abandoned myself, going to the screen for solace instead of walking my talk and really being who I was. And it was fucking hard. Like it was really, there was times where I'm like, am I actually losing my mind? Like for real. I thought that. I was like, am I going crazy? Because this doesn't feel right. Right. And so I used the power of prayer. I used the power of surrender. And it really shook me to my core. Like it took me to a place where I was like, how am I supposed to be podcasting and being this like voice of wellness when I myself am not feeling well? I just wasn't feeling well. I wasn't feeling confident. I was just dealing with so much fallout. And the one thing I'll say is this, like beyond just Bessel van der Kolk's work, the body keeps the score. Period. End of story. Every single thing you've ever done to hurt someone else, or every single way that you've abandoned yourself, it will come up in moments where you are destined to grow. And so this is the most money I've ever made. It's the most beautiful relationship I've ever had. I'm having a son. I'm reaching more people than ever. I'm doing all the things, but I've had to go through literally hell in order to heal and transcend the ghosts of the past that I was continually thinking I needed to feed. And so it brings up a lot in me just to even talk about it right now, because God, what an ordeal. I mean, I literally do not wish that upon anyone. And in retrospect, I could say, yes, everything happens for a reason. And yes, things happen perfectly. But with the knowledge I have and with the awareness I have now, it actually did not have to be that way. So I'd like to call bullshit on everything happens for a reason. We create the reason why everything happened, but everything does not always happen for a reason. We make solace with it. We make peace with it, because what else are we going to do? We have to move forward. You know, we can't choose to be stuck in the past, which is really what depression is. Depression is a focus on the past. Anxiety is a focus on the future. So that was the darkest moment. I almost broke up with her at that time because I was thinking like, oh my God, this is all happening. This shouldn't be happening, blah, blah, blah. Doing everything I could to make something outside of me the culprit as to why I was experiencing my healing. But really what was going on is I had to pass through the eye of the needle. I mean, it was really fucking hard. It kind of makes me feel like crying just talking about it. I mean, the trauma and the insanity that it was just so fucking profound that it took me to a place where I was like, man, I mean, I've never thought about killing myself. That's just not a thing for me. But it definitely took me to a place where I was like, I don't know if I really want to be here if life is like this. Like, take me somewhere else. Like, just kill me, God. Really? Like, just kill me then. Because I don't want to do this. This isn't what I signed up for. So one of the most beautiful things that came from this was my son's middle name. So his name is Nova, which is the supernova, which is the brightest light in the universe. It bursts bright and then it dies, like we all do. And then his middle name is Morrow, and it was my grandfather's first name. And so it's this honoring of myself being 100% committed to always looking within and to doing everything I possibly can to not project any of my unhealed wounds onto my son. And so Morrow is an honoring of the past, and it's giving him permission to have a future that is free from my own projection. So I'm not here to demonize my grandfather or demonize my father, but they came from a world where women acted this way, men do this, and you get about two emotions, and it's either frustration or force. And so how fucking ironic is it that I have a podcast called Wellness Force, where really it's about power, which is also Hawkins' work, right? Power versus force. So true power comes from being able to know when to apply the force and when to let it go. And both of these men, and I give them credit because they both went through their own hero's journey and their own challenges. But I am the chosen one. I don't say that from like a high and mighty place. Like I'm the chosen one because the projections, the bullshit, and all the generational trauma and masculine wounding, all that fucking shit stops with me. Like it stops right here. So whatever I need to go through, however many times the pain teacher needs to come around, whatever I need to go through, all the things that have been handed down to me as subconscious hurtful gifts from my grandfather, my father, my great-greats, all my relatives that came over from Sicily, all the relatives that came over from England, it stops here. It stops now because I say so, because that's my choice. And so even if I'm still learning when I'm 80, I mean, I hope not, but I don't know, right? Like no matter what I have to do, like I will not allow that all retch and no vomit to occur anymore. And so that's the gift of the tentacle. That's the gift of the darkness. And that's why it's so challenging, because on the other side of the challenge, there's so much love. There's so much bliss. There's so much goodness. But we all have to be willing to like truly look at that and be honest about it. Because if we're not being honest, then we're wasting time. We're wasting time if we're not being honest. So we have to choose to be honest at all times. And also, if you don't choose to be honest, there's no judgment either, because being honest is really fucking hard. So that's the gift of the tentacle.
When you said the piece about it ends with me, I had the hairs on my arms stand up, because yesterday in my ceremony, I said those exact words, and I was having this experience of laying belly down on the earth, just literally grasping her, wailing my grief into the earth that some of it didn't even feel like mine. But from within me, there was this deep longing for motherhood that I'd never experienced before. And I understood in this moment, in a way that I can't describe, that I was allowing the suffering of women and of previous generations of women in my lineage who were unable to bear children for some reason or another, or just had this existential longing for motherhood. And I understood that although it wasn't mine, I was choosing to alchemize it for them because they couldn't. And I understand that what we're doing here, you and I, and the work that we're choosing to do, and the work that you're doing personally for your son, we are playing the long game here in human expansion, evolution, and consciousness. And I think this cannot be underscored enough. When we do this healing work, we are changing the coding of our DNA, and we are changing what will be passed down for future generations. Of course, yes, there's the piece of tabula rasa, which you mentioned before, the blank slate and the children coming in, and the nurture part of it. But the nature part of it, our DNA, we are changing this through epigenetics and through this self-healing work that we're doing. And I saw the power of that yesterday, and I cannot believe that you brought up that line, because I think obviously that message really wants to be shared here for anyone listening. It's funny, I just started dating somebody new and had this experience of, we were talking about he's had a vasectomy. And, of course, it's like a long time down the road if we were going to have children, that's a discussion. But he said, don't worry, I've had my sperm frozen when I was in my 30s. And I had this moment when he said that to me, something just said, he's not the same man that he was in his 30s.
Oh
He's 11 years older than that
Yep.
now. His sperm's not the same. His DNA's not the same. And so I was like, this is going to have to be a conversation. You're going to have to get that reversed. But, it was this, what we're talking about here.
Yeah. Wow. That's powerful. So it's a big topic, but it's the time in utero. And this is to reflect on my own life story too, is my mom was struggling with her mental health when I was in her womb. And someone that I had on the show that's just incredibly powerful, it's Mark Wolin. And he wrote a book called It Didn't Start With You. And it was around generational trauma. And he said that through his research and through science, this isn't just spiritual babble, through real scientific research, they know that when a mother comes into the world from a grandmother, that she already has all the eggs inside of her that will birth her child. So just consider that for a moment.
Yes.
If it goes back that deep to where when my grandmother birthed my mother, the seed of my life was already inside of her. Just pause on that for a moment, hit that speed bump of awareness. So think about this then. If that's true, and we know science proves that to be true, how is it also incredibly profoundly true that whatever kind of thoughts the mother is experiencing, whatever stress the mother is experiencing, this is why it's like I really do feel profound about this, because right now I'm supporting my partner so that she can be at peace and she doesn't have to have stress and going to some job she hates and having all these tentacles that are trying to just basically already alter the epigenetics of this unborn child. And so it's so important for us to literally treat pregnant mothers with the most soft, sacred way of being, because they are birthing the next generation of life. And so I am just appalled. I am absolutely appalled at the 6-week break that moms get from work. I mean, are you fucking kidding me? What the hell are we doing that a mother only gets 6 weeks or even 12 weeks? Moms should get a year to 2 years where they don't have to work and they are fully supported by our tribe, which is the United States. Mm-hmm. But we have believed this illusion that somehow it only matters in the current moment what is occurring. Mm-hmm. And it's just not true. I think about this gentleman that you mentioned, 11 years ago, his sperm, whatever codes were in there, those are the codes that are going to come through. Hopefully he's a lot more conscious now, 11 years later, right? So I'm in the same vein of you, is like whatever I ate, whatever I thought, whatever I was projecting when I got Carrie pregnant is also, I'm just coming to terms with this now, what I will have to lovingly help my son unlearn.
Wow.
I'll have to lovingly help him unlearn that and be continued to having the generational pain stop with me.
Right. By first loving it in yourself, because we cannot be that mirror for another to heal unless we can love that part of ourselves and bring it home.
100%.
Josh, Trent, this has been one of my favorite interviews. I want to ask you if there's anything else that is lighting you up lately. That's something that's burning to be talked about.
This was really cool. I so enjoyed this. This is lighting me up. What's lighting me up is right now in my life, what's lighting me up is how do I scale and grow my podcast, my business, my coaching, my advertising, my web traffic? How do I do all of that? And also in tandem, how do I structure time where I can slow down, integrate these incredible conversations I'm having, and disseminate that wisdom so that I am giving it to my community and I am being a trustworthy guide. Mm-hmm. That's what's lighting me up right now, is with the monstrosity of things that are coming at me. I mean, I couldn't even begin to tell you the amount of people that want my time, or emails to respond to, or projects that are past deadline. Fill in the blank. Anything you can imagine has happened and continues to happen. So what really lights me up is trusting that if I just choose to breathe and connect with God as much as I possibly can, then all the answers are there. That's what's lighting me up the most, is my connection to God, deepening my connection to God, understanding what God is, so that I can live my life well. In the center of physical and emotional intelligence, there's this nexus point, right? And that nexus point is actually spiritual. So if I were to go back and reframe our manifesto or our mantra for the company, I would say discovering physical and spiritual and emotional intelligence. But if you dive enough into physical or emotional, you will eventually find spiritual anyways. So it goes without saying. So that's what's lighting me up the most, is like, I'm truly excited about being the safe space for my woman, my community, my podcast, and being a real guide, being a true teacher, where I've taken the loving time to integrate all these lessons from my weekly guests and put them into a spaciousness where people can really learn from it. They can get the Reader's Digest, they can get the gems and the gold, and they can soak it in and integrate it. And then they can go out and be inspired in their actions so that they're really integrating. You know, the journey I talked about in the beginning, right? We gather, we apply, we embody. So I'm really excited about applying and embodiment. I've done so much gathering. It's like, I don't feel like I need to gather anymore, really. I feel like I've gathered so much that my basket is fucking overflowing. So really what it is I'm most excited about, and what lights me up the most is, what is the next phase of Wellness Force? And what does that look like for me to really serve my community from a place of me taking loving ownership of the wisdom I'm receiving and giving it to them without being clouded by my wounding? That's a big one. And that's for all of us. Like, how do I take the wisdom that I have, and how do I give my wisdom without it being clouded by the wounding? That's the big one. That's the journey. That's, I think, what's next. That's what's most top of heart.
For people who are listening, who are really resonating with you, your voice, your message, can you talk about where they can find you on social media, where your offerings are, and how they can locate your podcast?
Just go to wellnessforce.com, and it's /M21 for Morning 21. It's a free guide that I made. It's a synthesis of 6 what I believe to be really potent practices that you can do. One of them is breath. There's a 3-minute guided breathwork practice in there. So wellnessforce.com /M21. That's how you can enter our world. And then once you sign up for that guide, then you'll get some emails from me that'll guide you more on your journey. And then from there, we have the Breathe, Breath, and Wellness program. And there's a weekly podcast. And we are building out this, I'm in the iteration phase of building out this like really beautiful, safe space of community where there can be this deep learning, deep embodiment, rather than people just listen to podcasts. It's like, what do they do? My prayer, my hope that from the thought room that someone has journaled from this. You know, I'd like to leave with this one last powerful exercise. Like, yeah, go do the M21 and take care of that. But this one practice is the emotional inventory. Take stock of everything that we've talked about today. Draw a line on a piece of paper. On the left side of the piece of paper, just write 10 things that you know are causing you the most pain. Just do it. What's causing you the most pain in your life? Then on the right side of the line, write 10 things that you are like truly most grateful for. Not just like, oh yeah, I'm kind of grateful for the trees. Like, really sit with it and write 10 things you're grateful for. Then be honest with yourself. Circle the one on the left that you know is causing you the most pain. Then circle the one on the right that you know is causing you the most gratitude. And then this is the act of courage that we talked about, the spiritual courage. Call a friend, reach out to a friend, write Haley, like write someone, and just say, I'm committed to letting go of this one thing that I took the emotional inventory of to really let go of. And I'm doing it because I'm most grateful for this one other thing. So my gratitude is the fuel that's going to get me through the challenge of letting go of the thing that's causing me the most pain. And then the bridge between that is, what is your community? What is your accountability? How can you build a structure, and how can you fortify and build a scaffolding around your choice that you've made? Because when you can really lean into that and have the scaffolding and have the community, you will become a different version of yourself. And when you become a different version of yourself, then you truly become what you want the world to be. We can't have peace outside. We have to do this piece within ourselves, and it starts with an inventory of whatever is real. So that's a process that I talk about in my work, and we talk about on the show a lot. So I want people to really do that. I challenge everyone to have the courage to do that exercise, and maybe post it on social or share with us what it is. But that's a big one. And I think that we can just leave people right there. It's been a joy. I mean, I really didn't know about you too much or your show, and you hold such a great space. You ask such great questions. You didn't even look at your notes once. And so, I'm inspired to share your work and put more of you out in the world, because it's this conscious inquiry that we all need so much. And the fact that people have shared this time with us, it's like, whew, really honor them for just sharing their time with us too. So thanks.
Completely. Thank you so, so much. This has been really fun, really fascinating, and I think we should do more.
Let's do it.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's
and
do
last
more.
thing, where can people find you on Instagram? Because I know you're on there as well.
Oh, yes. Trent_SD is my personal. And then @WellnessForce is the main brand. That's our page. I also have another brand for people that are interested. It's Civilized Caveman. And Civilized Caveman is like if you want to eat healthier and paleo recipes and things like that. So, but Trent_SD or Wellness Force.
Sweet. Thank you so much. There were so many gems in this interview, and I hope people listening really enjoyed it. And if anyone has a gem from this interview that they want to share with us, they can tag Trent and myself on Instagram, and we would love to hear from you. Thanks again.
Thank you.